Buying a new car is filled with a lot of excitement, a lot of joy. So you stick with me and I'm going to show you what to look for. So today we're going to travel underneath the hood of a car. So first things that you want to look for under the car is give it a visual inspection. The number one thing I go to first is the battery, of course. So while inspecting the battery, you do notice that there is some corrosion around the terminals. That is something that you do not want to see, because that is an indication that the battery is getting to a point where it's starting to wear out because it's leaking. Battery acid is dangerous, so do not touch it with your bare hands, because if you leave it unwashed, it can burn a hole through your skin. Alright, maybe you can work out a deal with the seller saying, look, your car is going to need a battery, so on and so forth. We have to work on the price because that's expensive. Now we're going to move on to the next part of the car, which is the air filter. Some air filters are easy to look at, some aren't. Some are screws, some are pop clips. These are pop clips. So this one, you just pop it open, you look at the filter, you see that it's brand new. This means that it's been taken care of, so that's good. Let's put that back in. Right, the third thing you want to look at is the brake fluid, because it's on this side, so we're just going to go into a fashionable order here. So what you want to do is pop open the brake fluid reservoir and check the fluid. Now, clean brake fluid is usually clear. This brake fluid is extremely dirty and it looks like it hasn't been changed in a very long time. This gives you an indication on how the car has been taken care of, especially by the seller who's had it before you, or depending on if you're going to buy it or not. But this definitely needs to be addressed eventually, because brake fluid is hydroscopic, means that it absorbs water, so you do not want moisture in your braking system. Moisture in your braking system will result into brake lines being corroded and rusting away, and then potentially an accident because you can lose your brakes. So we're going to have to focus on that. Another thing you want to look for in the engine is to actually visibly inspect the engine. You want to make sure that there is no leaks or signs of cracks or anything. So the first thing that you want to look at is the valve covers, of course. This one's a V6, so it has two. This is a valve cover. The second one is behind the manifold right over here. So what you want to look for in the valve cover is to make sure that there's no signs of leakage. Right here, there's some kind of leaking going on there, so the cover gasket has to be changed. One way you can tell the strength of the cover gasket is by pulling out the spark plugs, which last in here, and if there's oil in the spark plug sockets, then you can tell that valve cover is gone. You need to replace the gasket. What you also want to look at is the exhaust. You want to make sure that the catalytic converter looks good. You want to make sure there's no holes. You want to look at the engine block over here to make sure there's no leaks. Look by the oil filter. You also want to look around to see if there's any coolant leaks of any water. Look at the hoses to make sure the hoses are strong. The hoses are good, make sure they're not dry rotted or anything. So the fifth thing that you guys want to inspect on a car is the engine oil and the transmission oil. So the first thing we're going to look at is the transmission oil dipstick. Now, freshly new transmission oil should be red. Let's take a dab at this one and look how it is. That doesn't look red at all, that looks black. So that's going to need a service. Put that back in there. Now we're going to look at the engine oil. Engine oil is supposed to be a honey color. That indicates that it's fresh, it's new. Let's take a dab at this one. That looks okay. That doesn't look new, but it doesn't look bad either. So it looks like it can last for a little bit. So you can tell that was recently changed not too long ago. So moving on to the next set of fluids in the vehicle is the coolant. What you want to do is check that it is full, meaning that it has proper water in the system to keep the engine cool. And you want to make sure that it's also clean, like it's not dirty or anything. You want to ask the owner when was the last time he's done a coolant flush in the system. depending on his answer, because coolant really should be flushed every 3 years from a car. If he says he has never flushed it, then that's something you're going to have to do. We're also going to move on to the power steering fluid. Some cars have electric power steering, some cars have power steering fluid, depending on the year of car. Now, this car also has a full mark as well. Right here we see it's on the full mark. But another thing you want to look for is power steering fluid does have a color. The color should usually be red, especially for this car. This fluid is black. There's no possible way I can show you that, but it is black inside there. Take my word for it, it's black. So that's gonna have to be changed. The next thing we want to do is move on to the belts. Now, this car has a timing belt in here, so it's going to be hard to show you that because we cannot take it off. So we're going to go to the serpentine belt and the power steering belt. The serpentine belt, what you want to make sure is that it looks new, it's tight, there's no cracks in the ridges. You also want to make sure that there's no stitching showing visibly across the belt. Any signs of discoloration, stitches that show, or cracks, belt's done, you're going to need a new one. The power steering belt, this car has power steering belt. Some cars just have a serpentine belt. This one has two. You also want to do the same thing as the power steering belt. Make sure the stitches aren't showing, make sure that there's no cracks, and make sure there's no discoloration. These two belts are new, so they look good. As for the timing belt, you can't walk around with tools and take it apart to watch it, so what you want to do is ask the owner of the car if they have any records or services of the timing belt being done, and just see if they can provide you with that information. So let's go over everything that we've learned today. What you want to do is inspect the battery, make sure there's no corrosion. That determines the life of the battery. Make sure the air filter is good so the engine can breathe right. Make sure the brake fluid is good because it can absorb moisture and it can cause rust in the brake system. You do not want that. Make sure the engine oil and transmission oil are good because that determines how the life in the engine is, and it determines how good the engine will run. If you see any metal fragments in the engine, stay away from it because that can be some serious signs of internal damage. After that, you want to also inspect the other fluids such as the coolant or the power steering fluid. Make sure that it's the right color, make sure that they're clean and they have been serviced. Check the belts and inspect that they have no cracks, no signs of wear, and no signs of stitching. And that is how you check a vehicle so far to make sure that the engine and mechanical components are well and working right. Stay tuned for the next episode.